The dawn broke over Ouagadougou with a quiet intensity, the sun casting long shadows across the city's red dust streets as Kadiatou Sawadogo stepped onto her balcony, clutching a chipped mug of coffee. Unlike other mornings when she'd rush to the offices of L'Éclaireur, the independent newspaper she'd fought to keep alive, this Tuesday carried a restless energy. A single email had arrived at midnight, anonymous but precise. The truth is buried in Djibo's prison. Find Amadou Traoré. Time is running out. No signature, no context, just a name and a place that sent a shiver down her spine. Kadiatou, a journalist known for exposing corruption in Burkina Faso's elite circles, had received threats before slashed tires, menacing calls, but this felt different. Djibo, a northern town plagued by unrest, was no place for a lone reporter. And the prison, there was a black hole where stories went to die. Yet the name Amadou Traoré tugged at her memory, a faint echo from a decade-old scandal she'd never. Fully unraveled, she downed her coffee, grabbed her notebook, and made a decision that would alter the course of her life and countless others. She would go to Djibo. Kadiatou's journey began with a 6-hour drive through Burkina Faso's sun-scorched savannah, her old Peugeot rattling over potholed roads. The landscape shifted from Ouagadougou's bustling markets to sparse villages where children waved at passing cars. Unaware of the weight she carried, her mind churned with questions. Who was Amadou Traoré? Why Djibo? And why now? She recalled a 2015 expose she'd written about a mining magnate, Issouf Kampari, whose empire was built on shady land deals and forced evictions. A man named Traoré had been mentioned in passing, a whistleblower, perhaps silenced before he could speak. Had he been imprisoned all this time? The thought gnawed at her, fueling her resolve. By dusk, she reached Djibo, a town heavy with dust and suspicion. The prison loomed on the outskirts, its gray walls topped with rusted razor wire. A fortress of forgotten lives dot at the prison gate. Kadiatou faced her first hurdle. The guards, hardened by years of isolation and low pay, eyed her press badge with disdain. No visitors without clearance. One barked, his hand resting on a rifle. She stood her ground, her voice steady but sharp. I'm here for Amadou Traoré. I know he's inside, and I know why he's there. Let me in, or I'll make sure the whole country knows what's happening here. It was a bluff. Her paper barely reached beyond Ouagadougou, but the guard hesitated, then waved her through. Inside, the prison was a labyrinth of despair. Narrow corridors reeking of sweat and mold. The air thick with the clatter of metal doors and muffled cries. Warden Suleiman Berry, a wiry man with nervous eyes, met her in his cramped office. Traoré? He's just another thief, he said dismissively. You're wasting your time. But Kadiatou saw the flicker of fear in his gaze. She pressed, harder, demanding to see Amadou's file and access to his cell. The warden relented, leading her through the prison's heart, where inmates watched from behind bars, their faces a mix of curiosity and resignation. In a dimly lit cell block, Kadiatou found Amadou Traoré, a gaunt man in his late 40s, sitting on a concrete ledge. His eyes, deep-set and weary, met hers with a quiet intensity, unlike the other prisoners who called out or pressed against. The bars, Amadou remained still, as if hope had long since abandoned him. I'm Kadiatou Sawadogo, she said softly, crouching to meet his gaze. Someone sent me to find you. What's your story? For a moment, he said nothing, his hands clasped tightly. Then, in a voice rough with disuse, he began. I worked for Issouf Kampari. I saw things, documents, payoffs, land stolen from villages. I tried to speak out. They called it embezzlement. 10 years ago, they locked me away. No trial, no lawyer, just a cell. Amadou's words hit Kadiatou like a blow. She'd been right. The scandal she'd touched a decade ago ran deeper than she'd imagined. Kampari, now a powerful figure, with ties to government officials, had built his fortune on the backs of the poor, and Amadou was one of many silenced to protect it. She spent hours in that cell block, listening as Amadou recounted his story, a clerk in Compaor's mining company. He discovered ledgers showing bribes to local officials and forged titles to communal lands. When he reported it to a supervisor, he was arrested within days, accused of stealing funds he'd never touched. The judge, a known ally of Compaoré, sentenced him to 15 years without hearing a defense. "My wife, Miriam," Amadou said, his voice breaking. "She thinks I betrayed her. My children grew up without me." Kadiatou scribbled every detail, her heart racing with anger and purpose. This wasn't just one man's injustice, it was a symptom of a disease system. Back in Ouagadougou, Kadiatou dove into her investigation with a ferocity that surprised even her colleagues. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing Amadou's story with old articles, court records, and whispers from sources in the mining sector. The anonymous emailer, she discovered, was a former colleague of Amadou's who had fled the country after his own brush with Compaor's wrath. The ledgers Amadou mentioned were real, hidden in a vault in Compaor's Ouagadougou office, and Kadiatou knew they were the key to exposing him, but getting them would be dangerous. Compaor's influence reached deep police, judges, even some media outlets were in his pocket. She reached out to allies, Fatimata, a fearless activist who ran a women's cooperative, and Ousmane, a hacker who'd once exposed the governor's offshore accounts. Together, they formed a small but determined team. United by a shared hunger for justice, their plan was audacious: infiltrate Compaor's office during a gala he was hosting. When security would be distracted, Ousmane hacked into the building's security system, disabling cameras for a narrow window, while Fatimata posed as a caterer to get Kadiatou inside. Under the glittering chandeliers of Compaor's mansion, Kadiatou slipped into his private office, her pulse pounding as she cracked the safe. Inside, she found the ledger's hundreds of pages detailing bribes, land grabs, and false accusations against employees like Amadou. She snapped photos with her phone, her hands trembling, knowing each click brought her closer to truth or ruin. As she escaped into the night, alarms blaring behind her, Kadiatou felt a surge of triumph. She had the evidence, but the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, L'Éclaireur published Kadiatou's Expose, a blistering front-page story titled "The Cost of Greed." It detailed Compaor's corruption, naming judges, police chiefs, and politicians complicit in his schemes. Amadou's story was the heart of the piece, a human face to the systemic rot. The article spread like wildfire, shared across Ouagadougou's markets and WhatsApp groups, sparking protests outside Compaor's offices. Kadiatou's phone buzzed with threats, but also with messages of support from strangers who saw their own struggles in Amadou's. She visited him again in Djibo, showing him the article. "You did this," she told him, handing him a copy. Amadou's eyes filled with tears as he read his own name. No longer a whisper in a cell, but a rallying cry for justice. The backlash was swift. Compaor lawyers filed defamation suits, and Kadiatou was summoned to court. But the public tide had turned. Protesters filled the streets, demanding Amadou's release and a broader investigation into judicial corruption. Kadiatou's team worked tirelessly, presenting the ledgers to an independent prosecutor who, under pressure, opened a case against Compaor. In a packed courtroom, Kadiatou testified, her voice unwavering as she laid out the evidence. Amadou, brought from Djibo under heavy guard, took the stand, his quiet dignity silencing the room. "I only wanted the truth," he said simply. The judge, a rare honest one, ordered Amadou's immediate release and issued warrants for Compaoré and his allies. On the day of Amadou's release, Kadiatou stood outside Djibo's prison, the sun high and unforgiving. As Amadou stepped into the light, his thin frame trembling, the crowd, families, activists, reporters erupted in cheers. He embraced Kadiatou, whispering, "You gave me my life back." But Kadiatou knew the fight wasn't over. Compaor's arrest was a victory, but the system that had enabled him remained. She and Amadou began working together, forming Whistleblower, a movement to audit Burkina Faso's prisons and support wrongfully convicted prisoners. Amadou, once a broken man, found purpose as an advocate, his story inspiring others to come forward. Months later, Kadiatou stood before a university auditorium, her notebook now filled with names of freed prisoners. Amadou sat in the front row, a teacher once more, his children beside him. Justice isn't a gift, Kadiatou told the students, her voice carrying the weight of her journey. It's a fight, and it begins with listening to those the world ignores. As the sun set over Ouagadougou, painting the sky in fiery, hues, Kadiatou walked away from the podium, her heart full. The road ahead was long, but with every voice heard, every cell opened, Burkina Faso was stepping closer to a dawn where justice wasn't a dream but a promise kept,